the GenAI in TeacherEd Summit 2025?
Looks like they are getting together to work out how to use us.
We better watch what they are doing then.
It's with great pleasure that I now introduce Pip Sanderson, who is the most fabulous person at the National Institute of Teaching, who works with a huge amount of trainees and ECTs and teachers across all realms of their professional development as well. So there's a wealth of experience with Pip. Pip is going to talk with you about developing a positionality statement within teacher education. So with great pleasure, I now hand over to you, Pip.
Sanderson. I work at the National Institute of Teaching. I'm from Chester originally, and I went off to Leeds to study, and I studied politics and communications. I then, for my sins, went to work in the murky world of advertising for nearly 10 years and was organising pretty horrendous photo shoots for pretty awful products like this one here, and decided I couldn't do that anymore. I needed to do something a bit more meaningful. So I retrained to become a teacher and became an English teacher, and then worked in various roles right through schools into school leadership and school improvement work and research very briefly, and then I ended up working for Star Skip, running their teacher training provision, and then I joined the National Institute and work across all the programs we do, so ITT, ECF, MPQs, and School Trust CEO programs. So that's the lens I'm coming through, and the reason I became a teacher is, yes, because I was fed up with advertising, but also because I really believed in trying to address educational inequality. A lot of the health campaigns we were doing for the NHS and advertising were a total waste of public money. They weren't going to change the deal for people, but education would. Hence, that's my lens that I look through education with. Other important bit of context, I'm a mum to a 7-year-old, so I'm very interested in early years, even though I have no official training in that part of the sector. So a bit of context about who the NIOT is, because we are a new organisation, so just people won't be aware of us, I'm sure. We exist because we want to improve the quality of teacher and leader development at a system level, and we do this by interpreting existing research, doing our own new research and applying those insights to our professional development programmes, and also sharing everything we do with the sector. We've got 10 campuses across England and 21 associate colleges who deliver our programmes in partnership with us. Our campuses are deliberately in areas where it is hard to recruit teachers because we're trying to address those awfully named cold spots. The one thing I want to say about today, and a huge thank you to Victoria and for organising this, is that I think being in this AI and education space is really difficult. It's a really hard place to be, and I'm really grateful not to be travelling this path alone and leaning on the words of Nadia Drescher, who says about the importance of learning from others. So thank you for being here today, and thank you for letting me learn from you as we go through today's conference. I also wanted to talk about a really interesting new word that I came across when I was reading a book the other day, a wonderful book called The Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. I don't know if you've heard of it. And it was this word ironsick that the author had come up with. And basically this dictionary is to describe emotions that lots of people may feel, but there isn't an official word for. And he came up with ironsick to mean what's on the slides. I'll just give you a moment to read that definition. And that might not resonate with anybody else on the call, but that really resonated with me in terms of how hard it can feel sometimes to be navigating this space. But I also wanted to share that because a lot of what we do at the NIOT is using metaphor as a way to help with the way that we teach. And if I was going to ask you what's your own metaphor for generative AI, I'm sure you'd have lots of interesting phrases to hand. And you've probably done this with your own trainees as well. But we always find that getting trainees to think about how they view AI, or generative AI, I should say, is a really helpful starting point to any session, because we want to meet them where they are, and they're not coming to us as blank slates, and they're coming to us with their own attitudes and beliefs, and metaphors can be a handy way into unpicking some of their initial attitudes towards AI. I was going to ask you to do that, but because I started the session late, I will move on from this bit. What I did think would be nice to share with you is when we asked our trainees a couple of weeks ago to do this, these are some of the metaphors that they came up with, and a few more there. And I just share them with you in terms of how interesting it is, how mixed different trainees are seeing and viewing generative AI, and how that makes our job even more important, because it's such a variant starting point, but also how hard it is for us to do this, because people are coming with very loaded preconceptions or pre-attitudes towards it. So what I'm going to do for the next sort of 20 minutes or so is just whiz you through 3 different sections, but please do interject with questions as we go through. I'm going to take you through what our journey has been to our current position, what the implications are for that position, and then what our next set of challenges are coming down the line. So if you wouldn't mind, just grab a pen and paper for a second if you can, or whatever tools you'd like to use, and just quickly draw out this graph. So coming down the y-axis, it's your feelings about AI's potential for good in learning, and then going across the x-axis, we'll start in November 22 and we'll come right through to November 2025. And if I asked you then to plot what this graph looks like in terms of your attitude towards AI's potential for good in learning, what would that look like? So just take a moment, please, just to jot out that line. And this is also something we ask our trainees and our teacher educators to do, because we want to make the point that it's absolutely okay for that not to be a straight line. And the idea that part of the criticality we're trying to inculcate in our trainees is the ability to change your mind, and that not to be seen as a weakness, which often is portrayed as a weakness in the media, but actually that's a really important part of your professional growth and your confidence in your own learning. In terms of just sharing, in case anyone was interested, what my journey looks like over the past couple of years, it's a bit like this. Starting off very, very concerned that it was the end of the world, really, when I first learned about ChatGPT, and then thinking, oh my goodness, this is going to solve all those horrible problems in education we've been working so hard to try and solve, and getting really excited and hopeful, and then actually starting to learn a lot more about how the LLMs actually work on both a technical and an ethical level, and starting to see some real concerns in terms of when we were running hackathons on behalf of the DFE with groups of teachers and leaders. I've never seen such an emotional response to a CPD session, where in the hackathon they're working to solve a common problem in education, and like open mouth, tears, like real emotion in the room of what a game changer this is going to be for them, but seemingly not a huge amount of consideration to the potential unintended consequences, and the preparedness to put in safeguards, and the preparedness to think about how this might solve short-term problems but create even bigger ones in the long term. And given what we know about how busy schools are and how desperate they are to solve problems and such well-intentioned actions, but the pressure cooker they're under to make those decisions, it made me deeply worried for the implications of on our young people of this technology being implemented badly, but obviously, unintentionally badly. Nobody wants to implement this badly, but can we really protect from the worst of this technology and just harness the good? Now, this technology is amazing. I'm continually impressed by what it can do, but I am also deeply concerned, particularly for our trainee teachers, of where it may be unhelpful in their careers. Let me skip on from that. So when it came to our own position as National Institute of Teaching, we wanted to start from what we believe and know to be true. And that is that teaching is really, really, really difficult. And there are comparisons in terms of it's more complex than brain surgery if you think about the sheer number of variables they're having to respond to in a moment. But of course, the stakes aren't quite the same. But we do believe that to be true, and that's where we wanted to come from. We also believe the teacher expert paradox to be true, and that's a simple thing that I know you all know about, in terms of the better the teacher, the easier they make it look. And that wonderful quote from Lee Shulman that I'm sure you've all seen 1,000 times is something that we share with our trainees. So of course, we want to do everything we can as teacher trainers to support people to become really good teachers, because we know how fiendishly difficult it is, no matter what it looks like on the surface. So where we can harness AI to do that, we should absolutely be doing that, but we need to make sure we are just protecting from those unintended consequences along the way. Because the other learning paradox that we know to be true and was part of our journey is that the more AI thinks for us, the less we think for ourselves, of course. And I know there's lots of suggestions out there, and many good ones, in terms of when AI replaces something, what do we do instead, and how do we, build on this wonderful technology? But my question that I always get stuck with is, it really just a compromised reality? So when we say, oh, AI can write the lesson plan, so instead we'll get the trainees to predict what the lesson plan will be and then compare it. Or if we say that AI can summarize the research and then the trainee can critique or refine it, my question always is, will they? Will they, knowing what we know about human behavior and how hard it is to be a trainee and how busy they are, will they do that? Will they resist the temptation for the cognitive automation that is not helpful to their schema development to become competent teachers? And also my second question that comes to mind is can they? So for that second example where AI summarizes a piece of research and the learner, the trainee, critiques or refines it, what are they critiquing or refining it based upon? If they haven't built up the body of knowledge yet because they're really early in their careers, it's going to be a shaky grounded critique, and therefore how helpful it is to them. And also because they haven't got those robust mental models yet, how can they quality assure the output of the AI in the first place, and how can we support them to do that? So our feeling was that really a big piece of the AI in education training for teachers is a battle to win hearts and minds of our trainees, to try and convince them that shortcutting your cognitive processes to AI can often be unhelpful to your long-term cognitive development. So try and find the spaces where it's going to be less problematic to your cognitive development and resist that temptation, because the longer-term picture is worth it. But that's a hearts and minds battle that we're going to have to work really hard at. And I don't know whether we will be able to do that, because human behavior to find shortcuts is strong. And then I wanted to share this idea with you, which is something we've just started to use with our trainees, this notion of a pharmakon. So AI being positioned in our minds as both a poison and a supplement, because it seems to support human thought, apologies for the typo, but it also threatens to replace or erode it. And particularly that the support element of GenAI becomes absorbed into those automated systems that are governed by our instrumental rationality. There's a great risk that they displace rather than cultivate human attention. And by instrumental rationality, what I mean is that form of goal-orientated thinking that focuses on the how of achieving an outcome rather than the why. So again, it comes back to this battle of trying to win the hearts and minds of our trainees. Another thing we obviously looked at when we were trying to come to our position on AI was obviously the evidence base. But of course, as you all know, the evidence base is problematic. It comes thick and fast. It's mainly, it's not looking like a school age population. It's always university students. I can find all the evidence in the world to say AI is bad. I can find loads of evidence to say that AI is useful. Here are just two examples of ones that say it's no good. So it's really mixed. And it's really difficult to stay on top and get a real strong sense of what the evidence base is telling us. My reading of the evidence base is largely that it is problematic for trainees' cognitions development in the way they're using AI. But there is examples out there of research that shows it is of beneficial in some elements of cognition. But I think it is fair to say that we do have limited evidence on the impact of AI at the school age on its development. So I think that that's not too contested. But if anyone knows different, then please share that evidence with me. But what we went back to is, well, what do we know? Like, where is the evidence really strong? And the evidence is really, really strong on how school age students actually learn. We have a framework, whether you love it or hate it, that really codifies and solidifies the science of learning, or cognitive science, or however you want to describe it. And many countries in the world don't have this, but we have this really strong recognized evidence base that ensures every single trainee in the country gets taught the science of learning, which I think is a brilliant thing for the profession. And what we know about the way people learn is obviously that the goal of learning is to move information from working memory to long-term memory, and that motivation, attention, and desirable difficulty are key concepts we need to teach our trainees. And that wonderful quote we always use from Dan Willingham, that memory is the residue of thought. And of course, the point we try and make as well is that you only understand and remember new information by connecting it to what you already know. So we want to protect the grapple. We want to protect that cognitive grapple for our trainees as long as possible, but also be open to where AI might be helpful. But we don't want to lose the grapple to AI, because we think the consequences are not going to be good. So what's our current position? This is what we have of now. So I'll give you just a moment to read that through. Okay, so basically, we think there are certain conditions that are needed for thoughtful agency, and thoughtful agency is what we want our trainees to have in this space. The first thing we need to make sure is, have we really taught the trainees the fundamentals of cog science? Do they really understand how humans learn in terms of the brain function process? Plus, we then want to layer on top, in quite technical detail, how does generative AI work, both practically and ethically? And we think that is then going to create the opportunity for our trainees to make well-informed, intentional choices of how to use AI and when not to use AI. And that's what our whole program that we're delivering throughout this year and beyond is trying to do. But I'm sure there are many other conditions that are needed to make this work, and motivation is one of them as well. And any other thoughts that people have around key conditions that they are building into their programs, I'd love to hear about and learn from, and see if we can weave into ours as well. So please do feel free to share them in the Q&A function or when we come to the end. And just to briefly elaborate on what I mean by teaching how LLMs work, we break it into 7 steps, but we go into these 7 steps in quite specific detail, because by going through these in detail, we can start to talk about some of the ethical issues around intellectual property issues, about the biases of the data sets, environmental costs. The key point we can make about the probabilistic nature of LLMs comes out really strong when you obviously explain how the tech is working. We also focus very closely on language, and we challenge the use of the word hallucination and say, what happens if we call it a tech fail rather than hallucination? How does that change the way we're thinking about AI? And we also talk about the human cost in terms of the role that human moderators play in protecting us, filtering out the very worst of content from our own eyes. And we hope that then all that information is going to help them make informed choices, because we've combined that with making sure they understand the science of learning really, really well. The other thing we do when we talk about LLMs, though, is talk about the sort of social and emotional aspect. And we make the point that the chatbots have been designed to be deliberately conversational and adaptive, and they are more social than any other technologies ever managed to be. And we make that point because we want them to understand how they're being explicitly engineered for attachment and to take advantage of our evolutionary instincts for connection and validation. And we want the trainees to have the space to think about the big picture questions of, like, what happens when people get 100% attention, and attention that's very sycophantic and authoritative and human sounding, from machines? Are we going to see a shift in our authority dynamic, a shift in trust between teacher and pupil, whether that's teacher trainer and trainee teacher, or it's the teacher and the pupil in the school? Are we going to see a change in the expectation of human relationships, because no human can really measure up to the level of attention that your chatbot can give you, for example? What are going to be the consequences to people's well-being and mental health? Maybe it's not damage. Maybe there will be some positives for some people here. We also talk to our trainees around the exacerbation of fake news and the threat to democracy that the whole generative AI world encapsulates. And we also talk to them about the hugely problematic nature of generative AI in the pornography world, and the fake pornography epidemic, and the threat to society that it brings with it. Wonderful book, just a signpost here, if you haven't read it, is The New Age of Sexism by Laura Bates. It absolutely makes the point in brilliant detail, and I think this is stuff that we need to share with our trainees, because this is really important for their young people that they are going to be teaching over the years to come. But the key thing is we do this through a lens of trying to empower, not to frighten them, because we don't want them to feel immobilized by fear. We want them to feel like you know stuff, so you can make good choices about how and why you're using technology in whatever way you choose to. And you can role model that to your pupils as well. So, implications. And I'm sure you've all talked about this already, and this is the challenge, we want to give our trainees and our teacher educators knowledge of how the LLMs work, make sure they really understand the cognitive science, and have space and support to reflect on a couple of key questions. And those key questions in my mind are, what is AI adding? What's it displacing? Is it really improving learning, their own and their learners' learning? Is it saving time? Is it displacing time? And what are the unintended consequences it may be creating? And can we put in suitable mitigations for those or not? But when do we do that? We have a really packed curriculum to cover as it is. It is a real challenge to find the space and time. And this year, we've been able to squeeze in 4 additional hours of content around this vast topic. We will be weaving in much more for the September 26-27 year, because we're doing a much bigger curriculum rewrite. But this is hard to find the time and space to do it, and to support the mentors to feel confident in the space as well. So this is why it's a difficult world to be in right now. We also want the time, and we will make sure we carve out the time to explore some much bigger questions with our trainees. So you might have seen this report that came out on the 10th of November. It's about the predictions of where our AI is going to go, and here's just some stats for you. And I want the time and space with our trainees to be talking to them about what's going to happen when we live in a society where attention, labor, power, and perhaps even loneliness become mediated by machines long before we understand their actual influence. And I want to dig deeply into who is serving to profit from even making these type of claims, and to lift that sort of bigger picture ethical discussion. And I think it's important that our trainees have the chance to do that. But we also need to be pragmatic, and when we haven't got the space to have those bigger philosophical discussions, we do need to give our trainees something concrete to be immediately working with this week, next week, and beyond. And we developed this simple 5-step checklist that if you want to, and it's a big if, you don't have to, if you want to explore AI, we recommend that you use these simple 5 steps. And the key thing is that we are gathering case studies and examples from our trainees of how they're using AI, so we can co-learn together in this space, and we can share back great practice, and we can understand each other a bit more as we go through the months and years to come. This might be controversial, and if it is, but we don't let our trainees, or can we really stop them, but we very politely ask them, please don't use generative AI for your weekly NIOT lesson plan. Use it for the other ones if you really want to. But the reason why, and this is our rationale, is that our lesson planning pro forma, don't think of it as a form, as paperwork. It's a tool, and we've designed it in a way that develops your ability to plan. And that thinking process the tool's taking you through is developing your understanding of how to sequence learning in a way that is going to stick for the young people you teach. And the key point we're trying to make is, don't shortcut now, like do the grapple, become the expert, so that in the future you can use AI to lesson plan with much greater confidence if you so choose, because you've built the expertise to be able to quality assure the output of any LLM or any different program. But again, it's a battle to win hearts and minds. We do say to them, use it as a guide. Like, why don't you have a go at writing the lesson plan first, and then you could ask it to critique it, or you could ask it to help you solve particular problems. But our busy trainee is going to do that. I'm not convinced that all of them will. I think they will just shortcut. Let me skip through that. So in terms of implications going forward for the NIOT and this particular space, the ongoing stakeholder consultation is massive. We are constantly talking to all the schools we work with, and our teacher educators and mentors and trainees about this position and how we need to evolve the way we train and the way we teach around this topic. We are constantly thinking about how we can build a more learning opportunity. And as I say, there'll be much more in next year's curriculum for both trainees and mentors. We also have to do a big piece of internal staff training. Like, I have to bring the organization with us on this journey, whether you are working in ITE or ECF or MPQ, you need to be understanding this world to a certain point so you can talk about it with confidence. I don't want it to be just mine and somebody else's ideas. This needs to be the expertise of the organization feeding into decisions that we are making. And it's took way more time than I realized. A massive mistake I made was not realizing how much I needed to bring people with me on the journey, and how much I needed to do internal CPD as I was learning to help other people learn as well. And just to say, I've been learning about AI since November 2023 pretty much, and it's mainly through talking to generous people that will give up their time. And I've deliberately sought out the advice and guidance of people that are all across the spectrum of skeptic to enthusiast, to try and develop my own sort of rounded opinion of it, and looking, way beyond the borders of the UK to try and get that international lens. And the UNESCO conferences have been really helpful. And what's really interesting in that is that the UNESCO conference in 2024 was positioned as AI is inevitable. It's the best thing since sliced bread. Go for it, go for it. The conference, if anyone was there in the September just gone, the keynote speech was AI is not inevitable. So if UNESCO feel comfortable to be shifting their position, I think that is helpful for all of us, and that it's okay to keep reflecting and refining our position as we learn and know more. Another big thing for us that's coming up is our assessment changes. We now have degree awarding power, so we can award our own PGCE. So we are rewriting the whole way we assess PGCE. We are getting rid of essays altogether because we can't protect from the cognitive offloading. So we will reveal more when I know what those approaches are going to be. It's all in draft stage at the moment. But we're also exploring AI's role in any marking and feedback for trainees as well. But again, all TBC. The other big implication for us is that I don't know if you saw this report from the Commission into Countering Online Conspiracy in School that came out about 9 months ago. We were deeply worried by the findings in terms of what teachers and leaders were telling the researchers about their lack of confidence in tackling the issue of online conspiracy, misinformation, disinformation in schools, and they didn't have a clue how to tackle it. So we decided to try and do something to support the sector and put together a bid to pairs who've been very gracious in granting us funding to set up the Centre for Digital Information Literacy in schools. And obviously this crosses into the AI space because AI is exacerbating the problems of or the need for digital information literacy. So we have just set up this new centre. We're going to be running a 4-year research practice project, working with schools to try and build teacher and leader confidence to tackling these issues. We know there's real bandwidth though for extra CPD in schools. So what we're going to do is how can we add into ITT, ECTP and MPQs? So we are talking to bums on seats already. We're not trying to squeeze an additional space where it often doesn't exist in school calendars. We also firmly believe that this work does not sit in just the PHSE bucket. It should not be their responsibility only. It needs to be woven in through a subject lens, through a raft of subjects, some more suitable than others. And of course, the curriculum and assessment review has come out and said a similar thing. And obviously, we think this needs to start in primary and build on the great work that's already done in primary. But how do we support those colleagues to have more opportunity to support the young people to have this digital resilience? We're also going to do some governor training because that's a key thing. Key thing to mention about the centre is that it is open source. So everything that we develop here is not for NIOT, it is for the sector. We're working with a huge number of stakeholders to build on the best of what's out there, learn what hasn't worked and try and do something helpful in this space. I think I can just very quickly tell you, because I've got 1 minute left, that we're also running a project with Nuffield. So we're looking at AI assisted observation. So basically we know that it's really hard for mentors or tutors to always observe trainees or ECTs at a variety of moments across the week. It's often just like the same old period or whenever it is. We often know that there's real problems in that feedback, that problems with memory of what we saw, there's bias, there's time constraints. We know that recording practice and watching videos back with your mentor can be really helpful, but sometimes you can get a bottleneck in the feedback that you're getting of that recorded practice. So what we're trying to do is to build an AI observation tool. So you record your practice, an audio transcript is fed into the model that we are building, and then we're going to test to see whether the model we build can give feedback on areas for improvement that is actually helpful. So part of this research project is it possible to build a bespoke model that is genuinely helpful and without bias? And how does it affect the mentor, trainee, mentor, ECT relationship to have a third party suggesting feedback? The last thing we want to do is to not support mentors. We want this to be helpful to mentors. And if the research, and it'll be a big RCT that we do, is showing that this is having some unintended consequences, then that's what we will publish in the research findings. This is not build the tool, make it work and do some nice spin to sell it. This is about, can this type of tool genuinely be useful to the sector, or is it really not going to be useful to the sector? Okay, so just to end then, lessons learned in developing a position in case it's helpful. Seek out diverse opinions and expertise, keep an open mind, be transparent with your own biases. This is my big one. Don't let perfection be the enemy of the good. Don't get positioned as the expert, bring people with you on the journey. And it takes much more time than you think to do that. And then finally, we've found it really helpful to be problem-led. So what is AI trying to solve for us every time, rather than thinking about how we can find ways to engineer it into our practice just because it exists. Last thing, just to give people a takeaway, if you haven't come across this website called Better Images of AI, it's a really fantastic site. It's trying to make us think about the images we use when we talk about AI, because some of those images send unhelpful messages, and they have this bank of other images that you might want to use. And I've used some of these images with trainees because it's a great way to start debate and conversation about what we think this image is trying to tell us about AI. And they're my top books that I've read over the past 3 years, I would say, that I can leave you as a recommendation. And final thing is, I'd love to get your feedback. Please do get in touch. What have I not considered? What have we not considered as NIOT? Where do you think we're being unfair in our approach? And the more I can learn from your expertise and your work, then the more deeply grateful I am. And that is it.
Thank you so much, Pip. That's so much to consider there. And I really love the way that you tied that into the 7 points at the end as well. So it's really clear framework that you've got there. And protect the grapple. That is going to be my new my new saying, protect the grapple. That's going to stay with me, that is, for quite some time. Thank you so much for all your insight and reflection, and all how you've co-created your framework. It's very much appreciated.
Do you think we got away with it?
I'm not so sure.
Better keep an eye on this lot.